Retro gaming is not just about nostalgia. It's about preservation, about accessibility, being able to keep on playing those classics that made the history of our favorite medium. This is why when a new collection gets released, I get all fuzzy and warm inside, knowing that I will not only be able to play again the classics of my childhood, but also experience new ones that I might have missed back in the day. And I've mentioned just the classics, but what about those old games that are not considered quite the classics? Who will take the care of re-releasing those games, which only fault is to have been overshadowed by the likes of Super Mario, Sonic and so on? Well, that's where our friends at QUByte and Piko step in. So elation and jubilation, gamers from all around the world. I am Lucian and this is the World Gamer Show. And today I will explain you why QUByte and Piko are doing something extraordinary for the retro gaming world. What is that? Well, let's find out. To put it simply, the Brazilian developer studio QUByte Interactive and the Texas-based Piko Interactive take old video games that nobody is interested in re-releasing and do just that, re-release them. Now, somebody might argue that there is a reason if games such as Zero Tolerance or The Humans have not been re-released, and that is because they didn't exactly age gracefully, did they? So, does this make it enough of a justification to forget about them and to erase them from history? My answer to this question is a resounding no. I think it is important to keep as many games alive and accessible as possible. Radicalrex might have not meant anything to you, but I can assure you that it meant very much to somebody else that might not even realize that there is a re-release of their favorite childhood game on their favorite modern consoles online store. Enter QUByte Classics, the brand under which all these forgotten gems are being slowly but relentlessly re-released. Now, of course, gamers can resort to emulators to play old games, or to go through a more official way, even websites like GOG and Steam offer a ton of retro games. But for consoles, the landscape is much more barren in a way. Of course, we have some collections of the most well-known series, like Mega Man and Castlevania. But what about poor old radicalrex or TinHead? Why does nobody think of poor old radicalrex and TinHead? Well, QUByte and Piko do care. And this is why they're now bringing back from the grave all these forgotten games for PC and consoles straight from the 90s. Now these are mostly basic repackaging, simple emulation of old games that comes with all the basics such as save states, buttons remap, and screen size and filters options. But the emulation is solid most of the time, unless it was a problem that affected the original game as well, like performance issues that were present also in the original console. Nothing major really. But I do wish that there was a rewind feature, which is sorely missing, especially because most of these games are punishingly difficult. The extra department also usually lacks a bit, with no art gallery nor making of videos, which will be greatly beneficial for understanding the context of the time of the game's release. But you could say that the extras in this case come in the form of extra versions of said games. Some collections in the QUByte Classics lineup come with a portable or 8-bit demake version of the main game, or even unreleased sequels like in the case of Zero Tolerance. So yes, these are all collections of 2 or more games, in some cases including a third extra unlockable one, like in the case of The Humans, so that you get your money's worth. Speaking of which, these are all affordable budget titles, which is always a nice thing. The only real downside is that there are no physical editions to speak of. My only hope is that someday, maybe we can get a physical disc containing a bunch of these collections all in one. I can already see it. QUByte Classics Collection.
Nice.
After all, they've already released enough retro games to fit not just one big collection, but even 2 for that matter. And the random nature of their choices keeps me excited and guessing on what will be released next. It all started with The Immortal and The Humans, and they've released many more ever since. So why don't we go and take a look at some of the games that the QUByte Classics catalog has to offer. Starting with something radical. RadicalRex. Who doesn't love the T-Rex? Well, how about a radical T-Rex? Yeah, now we're talking. Well, in case it wasn't clear, this game was released well in the middle of the 90s, the most radical times ever. RadicalRex is so rad that he even goes on skateboarding through the maze levels of this pretty nice looking 2D platformer, originally released in 1994 for the Genesis, Mega Drive and Super Nintendo. The version included here is the Genesis one, but this collection also includes the elusive Game Boy title Baby T-Rex, which is sort of a spiritual prequel to RadicalRex. And I have to say, the graphics in both games are truly the state of the art for their respective consoles. There's also a 2-player option, but before you get your hopes high, it's just taking turns sadly. No co-op. But the games are still both worth checking out, both if you are new to the series, or even more so if you have already taken a skateboard ride with RadicalRex. Jim Power: The Lost Dimension in 3D. Here's an oddity. The original Jim Power in The Lost Dimension in 3D was a 2D action platformer released exclusively for the Super Nintendo. The 3D part of the name refers to the beautiful parallax scrolling in the background and the top-down view stages done using the infamous Mode 7 graphics. Oh, in the original SNES version also came with those weird 3D glasses for a true 3D experience. However, there was also a Genesis and Mega Drive version of the game that was almost completed but never finished or released. But it was polished and finished by Piko and ported to modern consoles by QUByte, while also adding a new 8-bit NES version. The original Super Nintendo game is also considered one of the hardest games ever made, so the difficulty on the Genesis has been toned down quite a bit, while still being pretty challenging all things considered. Still, we're talking about one of the finest examples in graphics and playability, with beautiful and extremely fluid animation that perfectly pair with the tight controls. The top-down stages that use the SNES exclusive Mode 7 have been replaced with shoot-em-up levels that work wonders for the gameplay variety. The new NES version is also pretty good looking, especially because the fluidity of the animations are all the more impressive on this less powerful hardware. The cherry on top is the fully animated cartoon introduction that was originally created for the Kickstarter campaign. So yes, you literally get 2 lost games that were never supposed to come out. It's as if we're taken to another dimension in which Jim Power wasn't a Super Nintendo exclusive at all, and it all perfectly fits the Lost Dimension theme of the package. The only weird omission is the actual Super Nintendo version, which was probably not included for licensing issues. But still, this package is awesome and fans of 2D action games should definitely play it. Zero Tolerance. If you had the Sega Genesis or the Mega Drive back in the day, chances are you might have seen or even played this game before, as it was a pretty impressive exclusive for that console. Originally released by Accolade in 1994, this early example of first-person shooter clearly isn't gonna dethrone Doom, but it's still impressive considering the console it ran on. Yes, this is clearly what we used to call back in the day a Doom clone, before the term first-person shooter was even invented. Yes, I'm that old. Anyway, you have multiple weapons suitable for different occasions and multiple characters too, each one with their own strengths, which was very uncommon for the genre at the time. The objective is to eliminate all the enemies before moving on to the next floor in this labyrinthine complex. The graphics are not that bad considering the genre, but the elephant in the room is clearly the small size of the actual action screen, which compared to Doom is really small. And the draw distance is laughable, and the enemies can shoot you by the exact moment you start seeing them. But that's where the minimap, which is always available at the bottom of the screen, comes in handy, since it also shows the real-time locations and movements of every enemy. So at least they use the lower part of the screen effectively, as you can also check the number of enemies left through the number on the left, and your life through the number on the right, even though I would have preferred a more classic life bar. So it's not that bad after all. You can even crouch, which is something other shooters of the time didn't have. Oh, and of course you can strafe too. Particular mention for the sound design, which gives all the weapons the right oomph that they need to feel as authentic as they can be given the hardware. But yeah, this is definitely the definition of a product of its time. Too bad that QUByte didn't implement the twin-stick controls, so you will have to turn and move all with the D-pad or the left stick, with no way to look around using the right analog. But they did go the extra mile content-wise, by officially releasing for the first time the sequel, which was completed but never released for the Genesis, Zero Tolerance Underground. Moreover, a prototype version of yet another episode in the series, called Beyond, is also included in this collection as an unlockable. They all play pretty similarly to one another, making them feel more like expansion packs. But it's still not a bad deal at all if you're into early examples of FPSs. After all, Zero Tolerance contributions to the genre on consoles cannot be understated. If you wanted to play an FPS on the Genesis, this was the one to go for in 1994. And it really pushed the wow factor back in the day, and I'm pretty sure made a lot of kids happy. So if you're one of them and want to revisit your childhood along with some new unreleased content, or if you're interested in a peculiar chapter of the history of the first-person shooter genre, then you should definitely check out Zero Tolerance.
Laser aim gun collected.
This video will resume straight after a short commercial break.
What's this magazine doing under your bed?
Get that weed whack away from my door!
String beans or baked
You
beans?
expect to pass this class.
Introducing the first Doom-like game for Sega. Zero tolerance. Because there's just way too much reality out there.
An oil change and a free burger with cheese.
Don't forget the ketchup.
Samurai Collection. I say it now, this is one of the best games in the QUByte Classics catalog, and it completely passed me by back in the day, so this is completely new to me. These are 2D action games that combine platforming elements with melee combat. The collection includes the appropriately named The First Samurai and The Second Samurai. The first came out in 1991 for Amiga, and later on for other consoles like the Super Nintendo. It's a good action platformer with an interesting sword force mechanic. The main character can fight with his fists and kicks, but also with the sword once the force meter is filled up. He can also climb certain walls like Strider, or even use sub-weapons to throw like knives and axes like in Castlevania. Most notably, he can also use magic, which is actually required to beat the levels. Now, the boss fights can be pretty unforgiving, with difficult and erratic patterns to learn, and the game overall is quite hard. Again, it's a good game, but The Second Samurai is the one that makes this collection worth the price, as it surpasses the first game in every aspect. Visually, it's a much better game, since it was released in 1994, again for Amiga, and also Sega Genesis. The controls are far snappier and the character much more responsive, but what makes this game special and stand out among the rest is its excellent co-op mode. And I mean true co-op mode. No taking turns. This time 2 players can join the massacre simultaneously for double the fun. What else to say? This is truly an excellent choice of games. For few bucks you get one good game and one excellent second game. If you are into 2D action games like Strider or Shinobi, definitely check this one out. TinHead. After Zero Tolerance we have another Genesis exclusive, a very fast and colorful 2D platformer that sees us taking the shape of an intergalactic guardian in search for the vicious alien that stole the stars. The objective of each level is to collect the stars and reach the exit. The unique feature of this game is its peculiar aim mechanic. With the press of a button we can change between 3 different aiming styles, one straightforward, one diagonal, and one that makes the projectiles bounce on the ground. The graphics are fantastic and the performance is very smooth. The only complaint I have is that changing the aiming can be cumbersome at times. Luckily, the unreleased Super Nintendo port, which is generously included in this collection, assigns each aiming to a specific button, but unfortunately runs much worse than the Genesis version, which is a shame. So yes, the Genesis Mega Drive version is still the one to go for. The Humans. The Humans is a puzzle game in which you control a small tribe of cavemen to reach their objective. If you ever played Lemmings, this is sort of similar, but with even more micromanagement here, since you need to control each character individually. I've already dedicated a full video review to this one, if you wish to check it out through the link in the description, wink wink. But suffice to say, I didn't treat it too kindly. I noted its great potential and valid ideas, but the cumbersome controls simply made this game age terribly. Paradoxically, the portable version included in this collection plays much better thanks to the practical cursor absent in the home version, which makes for a much better navigation. If you enjoyed The Humans and have some nostalgia for it, this is a must, since it includes 3 versions of the game for the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy, plus an unlockable Mega Drive Genesis version. As a side note, the Jaguar version of the game, called Dino Dudes, was included in the excellent Atari 50 collection, in case you can never have enough of The Humans. Thunderbolt Collection. We now get into shoot-em-up territory with Thunderbolt 1 and 2. If you've never heard of them, I wouldn't blame you, as these were 2 Taiwan exclusives up until recently. The first Thunderbolt came out for the NES, and it is one of the finest 8-bit shoot-em-up I've ever played, even rivaling some other masterpieces on the NES, especially in the music department. The second game is also pretty solid, with beautiful graphics and tons of scrolling effects. Also pretty interesting is the power-up and weapon system. Depending on which colored power-up you get, you receive a different weapon, and if you keep on collecting those of the same color, then your weapon will improve. The presence of an actual life bar also makes everything more bearable, as we are allowed some mistakes, thankfully. So yes, this is the pure definition of a hidden gem. Fans of shoot-em-ups should definitely seek this one out. Water Margin. A Tale of Clouds and Wind. Here we have another oddity. This is a bootleg game made in Hong Kong originally and unofficially released in the mid-90s for the Sega Genesis Mega Drive. Just like other games in this collection, the IP was eventually bought by Piko, who translated it into English and released it physically in 2015 for the Genesis. Now, thanks to QUByte, it is available for all modern consoles. This is also the only game on this list to not be a collection, as there is only one version of it in here. But don't let the fact of it being a bootleg fool you. This is a truly awesome beat-em-up, maybe not on the same level as Streets of Rage or Golden Axe, but still worth checking out, thanks to its colorful graphics, awesome character design, and rich and varied levels. You have 3 different characters to choose from that will need to beat the everlasting felt of ton of different enemies in many different environments full of details. You can also use flashy magic spells, just like in Golden Axe, to get rid of the enemies faster. And the fun is doubled once you get a friend on board to play with you in simultaneous co-op playthroughs. So yes, this is a way above average beat-em-up, which you wouldn't think it would be the case considering the bootleg nature of the game. Another obscure hidden gem, now available everywhere thanks to Piko and QUByte. And I'd say this is enough for one video. Of course, the whole QUByte Classics catalog is far larger than this, and they show no sign of slowing down as they continue to release awesome collections of obscure and forgotten games. Forgotten by many, but definitely not by them and die-hard retro fans, and all for affordable budget prices. So who knows, I might do another video covering the rest of them in the future. And QUByte doesn't even stop there with the classics, as there are a ton of original games under their wing. They even have their own digital events, in which they show off both the retro games from the QUByte Classics lineup and many original games as well. Speaking of original games, some of my favorites are the Puzzler Dog's Donuts, in which you need to feed the adorable husky 5 donuts in each level by setting all the tools in the proper place in the screen. Easy to pick up, hard to put down. Also, War Dogs is an interesting one I bought, as I love 2D beat-em-ups like Final Fight, and this is right up my alley. And I would do a disservice to you if I didn't mention Doggy. Yet another dog-based game, this time an awesome 2D platformer with Game Boy aesthetic, with tight platforming action inspired by Mega Man and Shinobi. But yeah, you can tell I love dogs and dogs games, eh? Now, admittedly, not all of QUByte Classics re-release might be considered masterpiece or, well, classics, but that's the thing, they aren't necessarily bad, and even if there are a few that didn't age well, do they deserve to be forgotten? These are parts of the foundation which today's gaming has built upon. Don't they deserve to be preserved and playable today as well by as many gamers as possible? At the end of the day, they did contribute something to the story of our favorite medium, even if in small part. So I'm certainly glad to be able to play them again on my favorite machine, whether it be the PlayStation, the Switch, the Xbox or PC. Again, I just wish there were physical editions of these games. For everyday humans, which didn't age particularly well, there is a Jim Power or Second Samurai, which are definitely worth playing even today. And speaking of physical editions, if you wish to have the single games on their original consoles, like say the excellent Water Margin for the Genesis, Piko themselves got you covered. If you visit their store, you can find a ton of retro games recently released that before now didn't get any official release. Piko buys IPs that nobody's interested in and makes physical and limited copies of the games. Then they hand the ball to QUByte for worldwide digital release on modern platforms. Another thing I feel I need to point out is that many of these collections often go out of their way to add some obscure versions of these games, in some cases even unreleased or cancelled versions, like in the case of TinHead or Zero Tolerance. They literally could have just gone the lazy way and just proposed the game as is. Instead, no, they went the extra mile. This truly shows their love for what they're doing and care for real about preservation, not only of what was officially released, but even of what was stuck in development hell. And also shows immense respect for their final users, us, the gamers. So yeah, if you are a retro gamer, you should definitely check them out, especially with the cheap price these games are going for. QUByte and Piko both deserve our support for what they're doing. And truth be told, with such variety of games between platformers, shoot 'em up and first-person shooters, there's bound to be something to your liking. I'm so glad these releases of forgotten games exist, and that they are so widely accessible today. So yes, thank you QUByte and Piko for bringing back the classics that no one else would. Keep up the great work you're doing. I look forward to see what you will come up with next. And I guess that really wraps it up. So now the word is yours, world gamers. Were you aware of such a huge catalogue of forgotten retro games? Did you play any of them back in the day? Or do you plan to pick some up now? Let me know down in the comments, and of course, feel free to check out my other retro gaming videos, as I have a true passion for everything retro. Also, if you enjoyed this video, maybe leave a like, subscribe, share it around, but no pressure at all. I just want to thank you very much for sticking to the end of this video. I will be seeing you in my next one, but until then, stay safe, play safe, world gamers.